What if the time you believe you still have isn't as generous as you think? That question, spoken calmly, eyes wide open, carries a different weight after 50. Before, it seemed that life would always give you another chance, another summer, another love, another cycle. But now something has changed. The body no longer responds with the same agility. Mornings have a different kind of silence. And the calendar, that old companion, no longer feels so distant. It starts to walk right behind us. There's a kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from physical effort, but from everything we've postponed. A later that never arrives. A later that more often than not is just a polite way of saying, I never had the courage. After 50, you realize that time is no longer that infinite carpet rolling out ahead of your feet. It's become a shorter road with bends that demand more attention, with descents that require more care, and with landscapes you can only see if you slow down. The most dangerous thing isn't knowing that time is passing, it's believing that it will never run out. It's living with the deceptive feeling that there's always time, always. That tomorrow will sort it out, that next week will call, that next year will finally listen to each other. But what if that later is too late? It's in the silence of the night, when the phone falls quiet and the house breathes in peace, that this question whispers loudest. It seeps into the drawers where we've stored postponed dreams, into the photo frames that show smiles that won't return, into the dull ache in our back, the eyes that avoid the mirror, the plans waiting for a sign from the universe that never came. Maybe you're waiting for a tomorrow that was never meant to arrive. Maybe life is trying to show you that it's not about how much time is left, but about how you choose to use it. Time doesn't shout. It slips away, and we only realize it when it has already soaked everything inside. And that's why this conversation matters. Because you still have time, but maybe not as much as you think. And precisely for that reason, what you do with these minutes right now, the ones alive in your hands, could be the difference between a life remembered and a life truly lived. There's a kind of illusion that comforts but deceives. It's the idea that there's still time, that everything can wait a little longer, that all it takes is a deep breath, a bit more procrastination, and to leave it for later. Later we'll talk. Later, I'll take care of myself. Later, I'll live what makes sense to me. But the danger of that thought lies in what it hides. The fantasy that time is infinite. After 50, this illusion becomes even subtler, because life seems calmer, days seem slower, but the years fly. Have you noticed how the intervals between birthdays have shortened? How Christmas comes around faster? How the kids grew up in the blink of an eye? And you still feel like you haven't had time to find yourself? The truth is that time after 50 has a different rhythm. It's calm on the outside, but voracious on the inside. And if we're not paying attention, this false sense that there's still so much ahead can make us postpone the essential until the essential becomes unreachable. Imagine a glass half full. You don't know if it's half full or half empty, and maybe it doesn't even matter. What matters is that no one knows the size of the glass. It could be small. It could be large. It might only have one more sip or still half the drink. Time is that glass, and life is what you do with what's left. The false security that there will always be a tomorrow is comforting until it turns into silence. And that silence arrives disguised, sometimes in the form of regret, other times in a restrained lament. I should have said it. I should have gone. I should have lived. But now, maybe it's time for an internal shift. The time you still have, whether it's a lot or a little, only matters if it's lived with presence, without haste, but with truth. Because the worst kind of longing isn't for someone else. It's longing for the life you didn't live. If there's a calling whispering inside you, don't wait for it to shout. Life doesn't usually raise its voice. It simply passes by, and it leaves clues. An emptiness that persists, a nameless fatigue, a discomfort without a cause, but with urgency. And that urgency is simple. Live now, before life becomes just a memory of what never was. Not all time is lost through great tragedies or wrong decisions. Sometimes it slips away in the smallest of things, in automatic gestures, in days that repeat themselves without color, without soul, without pausing to ask, does this still make sense to me? That's how many years are lost. Not through one big mistake, but through a series of small nothings. You wake up, make your coffee, do everything at the same time, in the same way, reply to the same messages, hear the same silences, react to the same discomforts. And at the end of the day, you can't remember anything that truly touched you. When routine becomes anesthetic, time doesn't stop, but life stops pulsing. You don't suffer intensely, but you don't rejoice either. It's a kind of existential numbness, like someone who is alive, but not awake. And the cruelest part is that everything seems normal. No one notices, no one questions, no one sees that you've stopped asking yourself whether you're happy, whether what you do every day still has anything to do with who you are, or just with what's left of you. Maybe there are habits that keep you busy, but don't take you anywhere. Things you repeat out of habit, fear, or exhaustion, and that, deep down, only fill the space where something new could blossom. And time, it hides. It hides in distractions that seem harmless, in social media that distracts but doesn't fulfill, in shallow conversations that avoid what really needs to be said, in promises of next week that never arrive. That's how months vanish. That's how the calendar swallows life, one day at a time. But there's something important to say here. It's not your fault. It's human. It's the body trying to protect itself from what it no longer wants to feel. It's the mind trying to keep everything under control. It's the soul, perhaps, trying to warn you that you need to come back to yourself. And if today you felt that subtle discomfort, that desire to change something, don't ignore it. Because when discomfort shows up, it's a sign that the soul is still alive. And what if the greatest waste isn't the time that has passed, but the time you let slip away today? This now, this exact moment, is the only time you can touch. And maybe it's time to make it a beginning, even if it's small, even if it's intimate, even if it's invisible to the eyes of the world. Because true life rarely begins with noise. It begins again in silence. And in the silence, time can start to make sense again. There are truths we avoid facing until life puts us right in front of them. One of those truths is simple, but hard to accept. Some doors have already closed. Certain phases won't come back. Some stories won't have a continuation. And there are dreams that didn't happen, and perhaps, in fact, never will. But that doesn't have to be a reason for sadness. It can be a sign of maturity, the maturity that embraces what was without forcing what is no longer. Because to keep wanting what won't return is like insisting on living in a house that's already been demolished. The memory exists. The longing exists. But the place is no longer there. Life isn't a rehearsal. And even if you've lived as if there's always another chance, another conversation, another stage, there comes a time when later becomes never again. It's hard to realize that certain moments won't be repeated, that that hug won't be given again, that that chance has already passed. But this pain, when embraced with dignity, can turn into something rare, active wisdom. The pain of not having done can become the courage to do now. Because accepting loss isn't giving up on life. It's simply recognizing what no longer fits so that something new can be born. Letting go isn't weakness. It's a ritual. And every new cycle needs a rite of passage, a gesture that marks the end of one stage and the beginning of another. Maybe you need to calmly write down what will not return, the names left behind along the way, the desires that faded over time, the attempts that didn't blossom, not to feed the pain, but to purify the soul, because as long as you carry the weight of what wasn't, there's no space for what could still be. And here lies the hidden beauty at the end of a road. It can also be the beginning of a truer path. You just need the courage to look back and say lightly, it was up to here. Now I choose to move on. And the most beautiful thing is that even with some doors closed, there are still open windows, waiting for a gaze that has learned to see beyond the longing. There's a kind of hope that doesn't depend on age, but on choice. After 50, a lot changes. The body slows down, priorities shift, illusions fall away, and with them, A part of the rush fades. That rush to prove, to please, to achieve. But it's precisely within this new pace that something powerful can emerge. The decision to live with presence. Because yes, there is time, and that time can still blossom, even in more mature soil. In fact, especially there, what can bloom now has deeper roots. It's like a plant that sprouts after many seasons, not in haste, but with purpose. You no longer need to try just to find out. You've already felt, already lost, already cried, already lived enough to know what truly matters and what only weighs you down. That's why so many people, after 60 or 70, find a strength they never had at 30, because experience becomes fertile ground. And from that ground, truer projects are born, calmer relationships, more sincere changes. Starting after 50 isn't being late. It's maturity in motion. The difference now isn't about how many years you've got, but how you choose your next steps. Living long is not the same as living well, and living well doesn't require a decade. Sometimes, a single year lived with soul is worth more than a lifetime lived on autopilot. Maybe there's an old desire in you, a forgotten project, a longing that fell asleep somewhere between bills, family commitments, postponed promises. That desire is still there, not to demand something from you, but to remind you of who you are, before the masks, before the fears, before the excuses. And even if the body asks for rest, the soul still asks for new beginnings. Time doesn't wait for your courage, but it does reward you when you find it. The decision now is no longer about how much time is left. It's about how much you want to make of what still exists. And that possible time, that living time, is in your hands. Not as a duty, but as a right. Not all tiredness is just physical. After 50, the body starts to speak a different language. It no longer shouts like it used to. It whispers, sends signals, delivers messages. But often we're so used to ignoring it that we only hear when it shuts down completely. Persistent aches, light sleep, shallow breathing, the weight on your chest when you wake, slower digestion, the mirror showing a more tired face than your soul would like to see. These signs aren't just about aging, they're invitations to reconnect. The body stores memories. It remembers what you didn't want to feel, the swallowed anger, the unspoken hurt, the love you stifled, the routine you endured in silence. And over time, all of that becomes pain. Not just pain you treat with medication, but the kind that asks to be heard, that asks for presence, that asks for a change of pace. Maybe now is the time to slow down, not out of weakness, but out of wisdom, because life, when lived at the body's rhythm, becomes lighter, fuller, more real. There are small gestures that are almost like silent prayers. A longer shower, a slow stretch, a meal without rushing, a touch of care, even if no one sees. These are rituals that tell the body, I'm here with you. I haven't forgotten you. And when the body is welcomed, your inner time rearranges itself. The heart calms. The mind breathes. The soul thanks you. The body is like a clock that can't be turned back. The hands will keep moving forward, inevitably, but it's still possible to adjust the rhythm. Rush less, breathe more, live in deeper alignment with what you feel and what you allow yourself to live, because we don't need to go back in time, but we can, and should, walk with it, beside the body, like dancing to a gentler song, a deeper one that's more faithful to who we are today. Not everything that's past is lost. Some affections can be revisited. Some silences can still be turned into gestures. And some feelings, though old, are still waiting for a chance to be seen with new eyes. Emotional time is different from clock time. It's not measured in minutes or dates. It's measured in scars that still hurt, in words stuck in your throat, in memories that return insistently when the world goes quiet. Maybe there's someone you haven't seen in years, but who still lives in some corner of you. Maybe there's a conversation that never happened and that you've rewritten 1,000 times in your mind. Maybe there's still forgiveness, or love, or pain, but above all, maybe there's still time. Some relationships don't need a reunion. They need internal reconciliation. A way to tell yourself, I release what hurt me, not because I forgot, but because I've chosen not to carry it anymore. Healing isn't erasing, it's looking with gentleness. It's allowing yourself to understand that the other did what they knew, and so did you. There are words that still can be said, even if the other person isn't here anymore, because sometimes what needs to be said isn't for them, it's for you. So your soul doesn't keep carrying silences heavier than 1,000 sentences. And there are memories that, if embraced with a new gaze, can become learning instead of prisons. Writing down one memory a day, revisiting a painful moment, looking at it with today's eyes. That doesn't erase what happened, but it opens space for what could still come, because there's still time to love, to forgive, to soften your tone, to walk a lighter path. There's still time to say, that hurt, but it doesn't define who I am now. You don't need to fix everything, but you can welcome the pain, without rush, without guilt. And little by little, begin weaving a new emotional story within yourself, where wounds no longer rule, but are also no longer denied. They simply heal. And healing after 50 is a profound act of freedom. There comes a point in life where the question is no longer, how much time do I have left? But rather, what will I do with the time I still have? After 50, time changes in texture. It's no longer about quantity, it's about quality. It's not about how many years. It's about how much truth you put into each one of them. Maybe you still have 20 years ahead, maybe 5, maybe just 1. But the real shift comes when you understand that, regardless of the length, all time can be whole if it's lived with presence. There's a rare beauty in starting something knowing it won't last forever. Knowing each step is finite makes every choice more conscious, more honest, more profound, and that turns life into something sacred. Youth wanted intensity, maturity wants wholeness, and living fully is what makes time worthwhile. Imagine for a moment that you only have 5 more years. Not 20, not 30, just 5. What would you say? What would you stop holding back? What would you begin without waiting for the right time? What would you let go of without fear of seeming ungrateful? 5 years might not sound like much, but lived well, they can be enormous. Because what makes a life memorable isn't the length of time, it's the depth of your commitment. And here's the truth you might need to hear today. You still have time, but only if you treat it like gold, not like sand. Sand slips through your fingers, shapeless, unstoppable. But gold is refined, it's chosen, it's carried with care. Your time, from now on, deserves to be treated like that, as something you choose day after day, with the dignity of someone who's realized life should no longer be postponed. The most precious time is this, the one you choose consciously from now on. Maybe you still have a lot of time, or maybe not, but enough is here. In this very moment you're breathing, in this moment something inside you recognizes these words. Maybe even hurts a little to realize all that has passed, but also feels a spark being reignited, the desire not to let any more of it slip by. Time doesn't rewind. You can't buy it back. You can't bargain for more. But yes, it can be reclaimed, starting the moment you choose to live differently. You don't need to change the world or prove anything to anyone. Sometimes, the biggest transformation starts in silence, starts within. In the moment you decide your story won't end as a draft, that your name still deserves to be present in full chapters, not just in footnotes. You don't need to be sure of everything, but you do need to be brave about something. Brave enough to say that, yes, you've wasted time, but there's still time. Brave enough to stop pretending everything's fine when it's long past time to live something better. Brave enough to take care of yourself not because your calendar finally allowed it, but because you finally understood that you matter. Brave enough in the end to begin again, not with haste, but with presence. Not to please others, but to honor who you've become, because you still have time, but maybe not as much as you think. And that's exactly why the time to live with truth, with soul, with wholeness, isn't tomorrow. It's now, here, in your next choice, in your next gesture, in your next minute,